I made a mistake earlier. Mr. Ernie Whiteside for state representative is up next.
Go Ernie.
Yeah. So, give a round of applause.
Should we do the jingle? No, we're not going to do the jingle.
Yeah,
This time.
jingle.
You want to do the jingle?
Yeah.
Jingle.
The jingle? We're going to do the jingle?
Yeah.
Okay. The jingle, guys. 1, 2, 3.
Be on the right side. Vote for right side.
Yay! Look, I've never run for public office before, at least not like this. There's a history of me running for public office, but there wasn't. It was a long time ago. And so when I started to run, I was told the one thing that I would absolutely need was a good jingle. So we went out and paid jingle writers the most money we could to come up with the best jingle. I want to talk about my campaign as a moment in a movement. And the reason I want to do that is because I was so inspired by the Bernie Sanders campaign, which was also not a movement, but a moment in a movement. And my involvement in the movement started not with Bernie Sanders, but in 2011 when my friend Tammy Spencer and I began to get involved with the Move On group. And we discovered something that got us involved passionately. And it had to do with the state level of government. So many people are very obsessed with national and federal issues. But here in the state of Michigan, something almost treasonous happened, in my mind. Our state representatives and our state senators and our governor moved forward a bill that virtually guaranteed there would not be enough money to run government. Now, I don't know how you look at that, but I look at that as pulling the rug off from the very underpinnings of a structured and orderly society that I need to live in. And what they did was they rewrote the Corporate Tax Act. And when they did that, I looked at, I don't know, there probably aren't as many geeky people out there as me, but I spend time reading funny things like Senate Fiscal Agency analysis of bills. And it wasn't really hard to look at the back page and see that they were going to reduce the corporate income tax in the state of Michigan $720 million, which was most of what they paid anyway because they'd already had it reduced so many times. And in order to offset this, they were going to increase retiree taxes $300 million. No problem. And then they were going to cut out tax credits and programs that helped reduce taxes for low-income people for another $210 million. No problem. And I did a little math, and I said, well, that doesn't add up to $720 million. Where's the rest going to come from? Well, it came out of our roads. It came out of teacher retirements. It came out of the money we need just to educate our kids and maintain our schools. It came out of money that we need to help low-income people through an economic, depression. Really, I mean, we call it a recession. You'll remember that it's a recession if someone else lost their job. It's a depression if you lost yours, right? I didn't make that up. Ross Perot did. I have to give him credit. So I saw this as catastrophic because government is so important to the quality of our life, and we have real challenges ahead of us in the future that will need money to be spent on them. And so I saw it as fiscally irresponsible. And if I could teach everyone here to say those words over and over again in reference to Republicans, not Democrats, because they are the ones who will give a tax break to the wealthiest, most prosperous corporations and individuals and leave government unfunded. That is fiscally irresponsible. Or pass the cost on to the next generation. So that was my moment that started me in the movement. And so we organized Progressive Democrats of Monroe. And I don't know, how many people were there in Progressive Democrats of Monroe at the time? That would be 2, yeah. So we started with 2. But as we got involved in the recall, people came to our doors. And John Moore came to the door, and he needed some some of these petitions, and a few more people came to the door, and a few more people came to the door, and we started having breakfast. And this is how movements start. They start with moments, and then they add inertia, and they add numbers, and they add purpose. And so when the time came that we were going to sponsor our own initiative, the initiative to recall Governor Snyder started outside of our group. We started that initiative within our group, and I sponsored that. We didn't ultimately succeed, but I think that we moved the ball a little bit down the road. And as time went by, we looked for candidates that we could support, so we got involved in the Democratic Party. And I'm going to tell you, there's, I got to tell you my nonpartisan spin, okay? You know, a lot of political parties have a lot of great ideas, and a lot of people come at this from other political parties or various political parties. And I'm totally nonpartisan. I only have 2 rules for the parties I will be involved in. First, they have to actually elect people. Let that sink in for a minute, because in the 35 years I was involved in third parties, it never happened. And the second rule is they can't be the Republican Party. When Bernie Sanders came in and became a candidate, my first concern was he can't win. That was my first concern. And my friend Tammy said to me that day what she said today. And that is, during the primary, you don't worry about whether they can win or not. You get behind the person that you want to win, the person who is the best aligned with you. And we jumped in. And we jumped in a year early. And our concern at that time was identical to the concerns you heard today. Our concern was we did not see the other candidates or their supporters at parades, on street corners, at tabling events. It's really important when we go through a primary that we are able to engage multiple candidates in the most positive way we can, because we don't know who's going to come out the other end. And the person who becomes the nominee of the party, what we would like very much is for them to at least be our second best choice, rather than someone we abhor. And so the goal, I think, in this campaign is that we have a second best choice that we will feel enthusiastic about at the end of the primary, should our own personal choice fail. Now, I've been told that the second best choice for the Democratic Party nominee for the state representative, it doesn't have a real chance of winning at all. Okay, the people who are in here know I'm running unopposed. So I'm pretty sure I'm going to win this one. I'm pretty sure I'm going to win this one. So I'm involving myself a little more in the campaigns of other people during the primary process that are important to send to Lansing or send to Washington, so that should I be so fortunate as to win in November, I would serve with the governor of my choice, or a congressional representative of my choice, because they have opponents in this race. When we were working for Bernie won, okay? He won in Monroe County, he won in the 7th Congressional District, and he won in the state of Michigan. And I was very fortunate to go to the Democratic National Committee as one of his delegates to Philadelphia. And there, he stumbled, okay? And Bernie was wonderful. He made sure that each one of our voices and each one of our votes counted, right up to the end. And the last voice we heard at the convention was Bernie Sanders. And he said, I make the motion that we record the vote and nominate Hillary Rodham Clinton to be the candidate for President of the United States of the Democratic Party. He called upon all of us to get behind the other candidate, and he did it himself. He showed us by example how to behave, and he told us that he wanted us to be personally involved in the party. Now, that wasn't a problem for me. I've been personally involved in the party for many years before that, and was going to be involved well after that anyway. But for a lot of new people who had really come to the party at that point, that was a struggle. And I think it's one of our great challenges as progressives, to move the needle in such a way that people feel good about staying involved in the party. And scolding will not work. Scolding is just not going to work. People, if they choose to stay home, they choose to stay home. But what will work is to make sure that we set the example and we show people that there's a good other candidate that deserves your support should your candidate fail. And the primary responsibility for that falls on the other candidate. They really need to make themselves the candidate that will be attractive enough to draw the support of those people. So we started Monroe County for Bernie 2016. And then the successor organization, Our Revolution, came along. So we started Our Revolution in Monroe. And we championed the issues that Bernie Sanders championed, and those issues haven't changed. And I think Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez said it beautifully when they asked her what those principles are. They're this: in a modern, moral, and prosperous society, there is no reason for anyone to be so poor that they can't afford to live. Right? It's that simple. And this isn't a national issue. We can do things at the state level, which is one of the reasons we got behind Abdul a year ago. At the state level, we can have the health care coverage that we need. And don't think Democrats are not in favor of this. I've been going to the doors and talking to rank and file Democrats for a couple of months now. And I'm a slow goer because I like to talk, so we have conversations. And conversations are neat because sometimes I get to hear them. Although I personally like it when you're hearing me a little more. Okay? And I'm just a little egotistical. Okay? But people, when I tell people that I support state-level single payer, and they voted in the last Democratic presidential primary, there are rank-and-file Democrats. They don't blink. They say yes, absolutely. Everyone has experienced in their own life or in the life of someone in their family or a close personal friend the actual financial catastrophe of even a very minor medical issue. Everyone has experienced how much more their auto insurance costs because it's doubling as medical insurance. And so we are so ready at the rank and file Democrat level for state single payer. It should no longer be a point of conversation between Democrats, in my opinion. But it still is. And we'll haggle that out just a little longer, and then we'll do what the people want. We'll make sure that everyone gets cared for at zero cost at the point of care, because it's the moral, ethical, and right thing to do in a modern, moral, and prosperous society. There are other things we're going to have to do too, and some of the things are a little on the other side of that tax barrier that I talked about. We have to invest in the clean, efficient energy of the future starting 20 years ago. Okay? We have failed utterly to make the transition. And let's not say exciting things are not happening. They do, but they're just kind of not big enough. Again, I'm just geeky enough to go to the internet and look at what percentage of our energy is actually being created from solar or wind. It's not that exciting, folks. And coal and oil are not going to keep doing this. And I'm getting old. If I'd have worn my tie, I would have been that candidate we're talking about, you know, the old white man in a tie. If we hit that wall where we can no longer depend on coal and oil in 10 years, I'm going to be in my mid-70s, and I'm not going to be able to rough it. Okay? I'm just not going to be good at that at all. Me and the wife will huddle, but I'm going to tell you right now, she's a little tiny thing, and she doesn't create much body heat. So we need to make sure that between now and the time we create it, we don't ruin the infrastructure that's already there. So I'm not an advocate of ripping of not replacing pipelines. Line 5 needs to have been closed, 5 or 10 years ago. It's just, wow, it's a catastrophe waiting to happen. Anyone who's seen the pictures of those pipes laying on the bottom. But we have to come up with a way to subsist between now and when the energy comes around. It has to be safe. And when we lay a pipe, whether we're putting in something in the ground or we're laying pipe along, we're drilling a well, we have to plan during that process how we're going to pay to remediate the cost that we've done. We have to know that we're going to be able to cap that well and remove the pipes, which I swear no one thinks about removing the pipes. Line 5 has to be removed. It can't be left there, right? And the money needs to come up front. I talked to some township officials recently, and that's their crisis of their life, that they have wells that we can't cap because the state of Michigan doesn't have the money to do it. So this is who I am. I'm a progressive thinker. I think the movement is not a movement. Someone said a movement left, and I say it a lot. I think I'm going to rephrase that. It's a movement forward. Because there are people who are doing the backstroke. They want the good old days, and they want to go back to when some people were either slaves or virtual slaves so that others could prosper. We can't do that. Some folks think they made it. They want to tread water. I'll tell you what someone who treads water long enough is. It's dead. We have to be swimming forward, and that's progress, and that's why I'm a progressive.
All right.